Hello, this is Professor Keen, and this is Introduction to Astronomy. In our last lecture, we began our study of Aristotle's book on the heavens. We began with his Chapter 1. You might recall some of the things that he talked about in that chapter. He talked about things like, what is a line? A line is something that can be only divided once. A surface is something that can be divided in two ways, and a body is something that can be divided three ways. A body, Aristotle said, is something that's in a sense perfect, because whereas a line can be increased in dimensionality to a surface can be increased in dimensionality to a body can in no way be increased in dimensionality. It's complete. Moreover, he says the whole, the universe, he would say the world, is comprised of a whole bunch of bodies that are adjacent to each other. So he's giving us this picture of how he's conceiving of the world. Now what I want to do is talk about his Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, and I'm going to be kind of hopping back and forth between some of the concepts that he talks about in both of these chapters because they're related. I should say that right at the outside of Chapter 1, Aristotle asks a question about the universe as a whole. He asks whether the universe is infinite in size or limited in size. This is a very difficult question to answer, and he will address this later on, so he really dodges or sidesteps this question at this point. Instead, he wants to talk about what the universe or the whole is made of. In order to do that, he's going to have to talk about the notion of bodies, what they're made of, and locomotion. So let's talk a little bit about Aristotle's concept of motion. Motion, you might recall, can be divided into different types. His concept of motion really means what we would call change. So you have motion from cold to hot. You have motion from health to sickness or sickness to health. But one of the types of motion is called locomotion. And this is akin to what we would typically call motion. It's motion from one location to another. Locomotion is a movement from one place to another, and this kind of motion can be classified into different types. So first of all, there is straight line motion. Secondly, there is circular motion. And finally, there is a combination of these two. So Aristotle is well aware that not everything is moving in a straight line, not everything is moving in a circle. The things that are not are undergoing some kind of combination of straight and circular motion. Let's think about what he means by straight and circular. So remember, his worldview that he's going to be trying to defend is one where the center of the universe, let's say, is right here, and he's going to argue that the Earth is at the center of the universe. Moreover, he's going to argue that the moon and the sun and the various planets are going to be going around the Earth in circles. After all, this is empirically obvious at the very least. One would say if you look up at the sky, it looks like the moon and the sun and the stars are all going in circles around the Earth. And this region from the moon upward, that's what he refers to as the heavens. And from the below the moon downward, that's the region of the Earth, where things change. So sort of there's this boundary right here. Everything up here is the heavens, everything down there is the Earth. So what does this have to do with motion? Well, he's going to talk about straight line motion as either being straight away from the center or straight toward the center. So it can be either away from the center, and by center we mean the center of the entire world, the center of the universe, or toward the center. Circular motion then would be motion around the center. And he's going to say that different kinds of things exhibit these kinds of motions. So, for example, if you go outside and you take a rock in your hand and you drop it it will fall straight down toward the center. That's empirically obvious. It's something all of us have done. We see that, and Aristotle is just taking that common sense observation and calling it, okay, so the nature of that rock, he says, is to fall in a straight line toward the center. All right? Now, we should say something more before we go on to talk about locomotion anymore, and that is how he classifies bodies. This is going to be an important concept. Okay? So bodies, he says, things that we see around us, are either compound or simple. And the root of the idea here is the same one that you probably have in mind when you think about the periodic table. You think about copper as being a simple substance or a simple element. Gold, oxygen, nitrogen, those are simple, whereas compounds are combinations of those. That's exactly how he's thinking about this. Simple bodies are made of single elements. And so we should talk about his notion of the elements of nature. So the kinds of elements that there are in nature, according to Aristotle and many other ancient thinkers, were like this. So they had a very elementary, a very uncomplicated periodic table. You have air, you have water, you have fire, and you have earth. Yes, this looks very simple to us, but the important thing I'd like to emphasize here is that this is very modern in a sense, because he's saying all the complex things that we see around us, desks and tables and people, can really be understood as combinations of these four simple elements. If you had a pure element like earth, air, fire, and water, it would be a simple body. If you have a combination, it would be a compound. So you as a person might be, 3 parts water, 1 part earth, and 1 part fire, or something like that. So you would be a compound body. Now, here's the important point also, is that there's a link between the type of body and the type of locomotion that is natural to it. So Aristotle argues that simple bodies, that is pure earth, pure air, pure fire, or pure water, simple bodies have a simple principle of movement. That is, simple bodies undergo straight line motion. In particular, air has simple body. Let's make a little table. The simple body and the type of locomotion that is natural. That's natural to it. So air, it has a simple straight line motion away from the center. Straight away from the center. Fire, likewise, has a simple motion that is straight away from the center. Earth has a simple motion that is straight toward the center. And water has a simple motion that is straight toward the center. Why does he think this? Well, it's kind of common sense, right? So if you light a flame, what does that flame tend to do? It tends to rise up, right? If you have a piece of rock and you drop it, it tends to fall straight down. Likewise, water tends to fall straight down, okay? So this isn't ridiculous. The idea here is that when you look at nature, certain simple objects undergo simple motion, and it appears that it's straight toward the center of the earth or toward the center of the universe, or straight away from the center of the universe. Now, of course, what you can do is you can make things go in ways that are not natural to them. So, for example, I could take a rock, pick it up off the ground, and throw it over my house, right? When I do that, I am violating its nature. I'm kind of overcoming its natural motion and giving it an unnatural motion. So he divides motion also. He says motion can be either natural, that is according to its nature, or unnatural, that is when you violate its nature, right? So the example I gave of picking up a rock, normally left to itself, its natural motion would be to fall straight down. But by violating that nature, I can make it do something different. Okay, so natural and unnatural motion. All right. Also, maybe I should say one other thing. Compounds, he's going to say, I don't know if he says it in this chapter or one of the later chapters, but compounds, which are comprised of kind of combinations of these, what kind of motion is natural to them? Well, they're kind of at war with themselves. They have mixed motives, you might say. They don't quite know what to do, and so they might have motion that is characteristic of whatever element that prevails in them. But later on, he's going to say that when bodies are compound or mixed, this kind of disharmony eventually leads to their decay. All right, we'll come back to that a little bit later. Okay, let me say another thing, and this is something from chapter 3. He says that if we think about objects that move straight away from the center and objects that move straight toward the center, these ones exhibit gravity or heaviness. Okay, so he uses the word gravitas or gravity to mean things that have heaviness that tend to fall straight toward the center. Air and fire, on the other hand, don't exhibit gravity, they exhibit levity, a tendency to move upward or away from the center. So when you come across the word gravity in Aristotle, he uses the same term, gravity, that we use today, but he means something quite different. He is not thinking of Newtonian gravity, of course. That was Newton came up with the idea that all masses attract other masses. The sun attracts the earth attracts rocks, and so on. Newton calls that gravity, but that is not how Aristotle is thinking about this. He's thinking about gravity or heaviness as kind of a tendency to move toward the center, and levity as a tendency to move away from the center. Okay, and maybe I'll say one other thing about this. Since earth and water both tend to move toward the center, how can one reconcile that with the fact that rocks fall when they're in water? Well, rocks have more gravitas or more heaviness than water, so they're relative to one another, and that's why a rock would fall through water. And yet, if you drop water out of a bucket, it will also fall straight down. Okay, now with all this background on types of bodies and classifications of bodies and classifications of motion, where is he going with all of this? Well, here's the important point that he's going to make. He's going to say, well, we're talking about these earthly elements, earth, air, fire, and water, but now let's think about the heavenly objects, the moon, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, the stars, and so on. What kind of motion is natural to them? Well, look at them. They look like they're moving in a circle around the earth. So heavenly, or celestial, we might say, celestial bodies do not exhibit straight line motion, either away from the center or toward the center. Rather, they exhibit circular motion. Now, if they exhibit circular motion, what are they made of? So the question is, what are they made of? What are they comprised of? After all, if they are made of air, they would exhibit straight line motion. If they were water, they would also exhibit straight line motion. Likewise with fire and earth. Since they are moving in circular motion, they must not be one of the simple bodies. They must not be made of earth, air, fire, or water. Because if they were, then they would exhibit the kind of motion that is typical of those bodies. Now you might say right away, wait a minute. It is possible for Earth, rocks, to move in circles. After all, I can tie a rock to the end of a string and spin it around in a circle. That's right. But why can't that be what's going on with the heavens? Why can't we say that the moon or Mars, why can't Aristotle say the moon or Mars is made of rock? Well, he says because when you take a rock and tie it to a string and swing it around your head, it is exhibiting unnatural motion, right? Its motion is unnatural. An unnatural motion tends to decay or go away. Unnatural motion tends to dissipate or decay over time, right? So if I take a rock and I do a motion that's unnatural to it, I throw it up in the air, I'm violating its nature, eventually that upward motion goes away and it falls back to earth because the natural motion overcomes eventually the violent or unnatural motion. Now, the moon, the sun, Mars, and so on, if they were undergoing unnatural motion, that is, they were going in circles and that violates their nature. Let's suppose, for sake of argument, they're rocks and they're going in circles opposed to their natural motion. Eventually that motion then would decay, right? Eventually they would slow down and change. But here's the point, is that for as long as anyone has cared to look at the heavens, they've always been going in circles. As far as the ancient records, Aristotle says, the ancient opinions and observations show us that for as long as anyone's cared to look at the heavens, they've been going in circular motion. This is evidence, he says, that whatever motion they're undergoing, it must be natural to them. The heavens must have a natural circular motion. The heavens must have a natural circular motion. Okay? And if they are undergoing natural circular motion, then they cannot be one of these four elements. They must be something different. And this is where Aristotle says, well, we must hypothesize that there is a fifth element, another element besides air, water, fire, and earth, and he calls this ether. So ether is the hypothetical element whose natural motion is circular. Okay, so notice he's using kind of a process of elimination here. It can't be one of our four other elements, therefore it must be a fifth element. We'll call this ether because it's always going in a circle, and that must be the natural motion for ether. Okay, so why don't we stop there? This is basically brings us up to about the end of chapter 3, and next time we'll move on to the next chapter of A Student's Guide to the Great Physics Texts.